You're here once again with your favorite podcast in the mother farming world. You got the Velvet Vibes podcast. You're here with Velvet. We're here with an intriguing young character, yo man, Alex Smith. We've got Alex in here. Talk to
Hey man, how you going? Thanks for having me.
him.
I'm Alex. I hoping the delay isn't too bad. So if there's any big pauses, it's not me taking a million years to think. It's just because crossing the waters with the internet.
Oh yeah. Well, we've left the whole continent for this one here, so we're reaching out to the good old Australia. How's life out there?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Hmm.
The I don't want to get too intense too quick, but like COVID stuff's going pretty okay over here. Hopefully it's going better in America at the moment.
And it's we're getting there. Progress is a
Hmm.
process.
Yeah,
There we go.
nice.
So, before I get into interviewing the great Alex, I do have to tell you, I got to give you some compliments on your music because the music that you sent me, I noticed that you have a variety of different styles because I heard one song and it gave me a folk, country, alternative type of vibe. And then I heard another song that it gave me, I think it was Triggered, then it gave me a 80s,
Hmm.
somewhat 80s rock type of vibe. And as you see, I get my production on, so I have the magical ear. But I was like, okay, this guy can go down a lot of different paths. So I gotta salute this. So we're gonna have a good
There you go.
conversation. But
I look forward to it.
we'll start from the simple part, as we always want to know what in the hell got you into music in the first place.
Well, I guess the like if we're going back to day one, uh, like day one, my dad really liked music, and he had this massive vinyl collection, and also yeah, he would just like play stuff all the time. I remember he sat me down and was like, "Oh, check out this album by Meatloaf," and it was Bad Out of Hell, and I was like, "Wow!" Because I remember I actually as a kid I used to say I didn't like music,
Wow.
because my brother always had the yeah right who doesn't like music, but my brother always had the MTV on, and I just didn't like the music at the time, and I was like, "Oh, I don't like music," but that just wasn't my kind of music.
Ah.
But then my dad got me into like classic rock and stuff, and
Hmm.
yeah, and it all just kind of started from there.
Indeed. What was at that time your favorite band once you finally came into the music world?
Well, I know that it took me a lot longer than it should have, but like once I got into Queen, it was kind of like, all right, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I didn't get into Queen until I was like 16.
Hmm.
Late Queen fan.
Yeah. I think we all have those moments where we have to dig back in the crates, do our research, and then we
Hmm.
realize, I like this shit. I respect that. Now,
Yeah.
do you play any instruments, or are you just singer? Because I know that can go down a lot of different paths.
Yeah, I'm probably a keyboard player and also a guitarist, but I also kind of play the bass, but I'm also a singer. And if like if like forced to, I can play a very basic four on the floor drum beat.
Oh wow.
But yeah,
So which instrument did you start with?
I started with guitar, and that was to try and impress a girl, and it didn't work because you can't really just pick it up like that. So it was kind of like
Yeah.
just sucking a guitar for like 6 months.
And what made you keep
Hmm.
doing it? Because after you failed with this young lady, you could have just threw the guitar in the corner and said, "Well, that failed." What made you keep on strumming?
I really liked Tenacious D as a kid, and I mean I still do.
Yeah.
But their sound was it was like very acoustic guitar focused at the time. Like I know they have their full produced stuff, but it was very acoustic guitar, and I was like, oh, acoustic.
No.
I started writing music, and it was kind of the only instrument I knew how to play. So I was like, gotta have something to accompany my voice. And I was very, very, very bad at writing music when I started, but I had lots of fun, so I kept at it.
And so you went from the acoustic, I'm assuming, to the bass.
Uh, no, I actually went acoustic to piano because I was at my high school and they had like a music room, and you could like, it was the rehearsal room and you could just like practice at lunch. So I just spent lunch times teaching myself piano and just having fun.
Band
Um,
school.
yeah,
That's
yeah, it was a very cool school.
pretty cool.
Um, and yeah, and then eventually, years later, I got my own keyboard, and I found that I've also found that I started writing better songs on keyboard because I had a better understanding of like what was happening musically. Whereas because the fretboard of a guitar is kind of like this is A, but this is A, and this.
Oh yeah,
Whereas with a piano, it's much more like these are the low notes, these are the high notes.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Makes
very easy
sense.
to like visualize it. Yeah.
Once you get those chords and scales and all that good stuff, then it makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah.
Otherwise, hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming with the drums, because it's, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's something you can kind of just pick up in as far as the beginning stage. Is that what happened
Mhm.
there?
Yeah, I had in high school again, I had a friend who was a drummer, and I was like, "How do you drum? How do you do it?" Also, please forgive the noise. That's why I moved into the other room before, because I was like, "Fuck, it's so loud." But he was a drummer, and I was like, "How do you play the drums?" And he was like, "Oh, come around and I'll show you." And yeah, basically just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that shocks me with drums, because I play drums a little myself,
Mm.
but just probably the same as you, just enough to get the point across. I just don't understand how people continue to play it for hours, because I play it and then I'm like, oh shit, this hurts. My arms are tired.
Yeah.
It
I
sounds.
can't
Go ahead.
all the like the polyrhythms and stuff when they start doing like anything other than I just
Yeah,
can't figure out where it's like and then you got
yeah,
this doing something else.
yeah,
I'm like, how can you what are you, an octopus with like brains in each of your hands? Like how can you figure that out?
yeah.
I can't
It's
do it.
it's a hand-eye coordination thing, but it is complicated. And I gotta give you credit if you're singing and playing the keyboard though, because I always thought that was crazy. When I see someone, like, I can play a little when I'm doing
Mm.
production and things like that, but when I play and then I sing, I can only do one or the other. I don't understand how people can play and they can sing, and I'm like, man, that's amazing.
Well, the trick is I play keyboard like I play the guitar. So if it's like a really like plunky thing, I can't sing and play. But if it's just like becomes
Repetitive, yeah.
yeah. So it's I'm not a great keyboard player, but I play the way I play,
No,
you know?
your style, your way.
Yeah.
And
Wouldn't win
so,
any awards for it.
with what you've learned in music, have you dabbled into the production side any, or is it more focused on instruments and songwriting?
Yeah, so I in high school, I was in sorry, in music class in high school. They had like, Sibelius and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, you don't have to be amazing at playing. You just if you can figure out how to make the software do what you want." And then I, played around in GarageBand growing up, and then I moved on to Logic, as you do. Um, and I was producing my own stuff. I made an 11-track album every year for 4 years, but it sucked in reflection.
Yeah,
But at the time, I was really proud of it. And I was actually gonna Crazy Days, my first EP, I was gonna release myself, and I was working really hard on it. And then eventually, approached another producer, and I'm so glad I did, because I listened back to the demos and was like, oh, this is so bad. But now I'm at university doing music technology myself, because I want to learn how to do it myself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. It's always respected for anybody that's actually going to school or anything for it, because then you can dive way deeper into it.
Mm.
Might even learn a little about the marketing side as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, with that, with the playing with the production and everything like that, you said you're a Logic guy. What
Yeah.
is what is your process in the studio? Like as far as making a song, what is your process? You know, some people make the beat and then they write to the beat. Some people write a song and then make a beat to the song that's already written. What is your
Mm.
process for making the music?
Well, first I'll do like a campfire track or a scratch track, just with like piano and vocal, just to like figure out what I want the song to be, like just to figure out the structure and everything. And then once I've got that, I'll have that recording. Um, I'll figure out the tempo by like clicking it to set up the track, and then the way I do it is I have a really obnoxious drum beat that I know I'm not going to get attached to, because if I have something that kind of works, then I'll be like, oh, that works, and then I'll forget about it and I'll leave it in there and it'll be lazy and bad. So I have like a really loud, massive reverby thing that I'll have to remove.
Yeah.
Um,
I like
and
this.
then I get like a paddy kind of synth that again isn't anything I'd get comfortable with, and I just do the block chords, then figure out the arrangement and stuff, so I know, as in like the markers of the track, so I know where everything is.
Yeah.
Then yeah, then I guess I think it's drums first. I figure out proper drums, then bass. Got to have your drum and bass so it all interlocks. Then rhythm guitar. Depends on the song,
So you
but
kind of do drums before you do melody.
well, I would have figured out what the melody was in the beginning when
Okay.
I write it on the piano.
Hmm.
So then it's just a matter of like laying it up,
Yeah,
and
putting
then
that puzzle
vocals
back
last.
together.
Yeah.
And while you're coming up with the beat or the anything of that nature, are you already writing lyrics, or are you just kind of thinking the way that you want the song to go? Some people they're already writing lyrics, and some people are
Mm.
just bum, 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 just thinking how they want to say it.
I think I'm a lyric. It's kind of a vibe and melody just before lyrics first, and then I get like the rest of the melody in, because I work a very repetitive job,
Hmm.
where I'm doing the same thing for hours and hours, and I kind of sing to keep myself sane, and so I I kind of have that time, yeah, where you can just be like, and then eventually you get like some dummy lyrics, and then it becomes real lyrics,
Yes.
and then once you're like, oh, okay, I think this is going to be, like a jazz song, and then you're like, okay, well now I'm going to start writing lyrics for like a jazz song, and then if it's a jazz song, then the melody's probably going to sound a bit more like this.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of a gooey, like no one thing comes before the rest. It all just kind of like,
It's a
you know,
Rubik's cube you have here.
yeah.
Now, so this makes my theory correct about you. So you would you categorize or would you put yourself in any genre, or are you just simply making music? Because I couldn't, and this is not a bad thing, but I was like,
Mm.
I can't find a genre for this. I was like, it sounds like he went here with this and he went here with this. Is that the goal? Because I just heard you say, oh, it might be a jazz song,
Yeah.
right?
But yeah, I found that I like to just, so some people really like, like I like metal and I hate country, or like I like jazz and I hate this. Whereas I feel like there's kind of a level in every single genre where someone's like, oh, I'm not into metal, but like I like this, or like I'm not into jazz, but like I like this. And I I think that everyone likes music, and I try to, because I like lots of different genres,
Mhm.
and so I just try to write songs that I like. But
Makes sense.
I found that in the past, media people aren't satisfied with that, so you kind of got to find like a kind of label to give yourself so that
For your
like
audience.
yeah, so that people can figure out, because it's hard from a marketing point to sell yourself for a start, and also for audiences who have never heard of you to understand
Hmm.
what you are,
Yeah.
which is tough.
I think it's kind of fun what you're doing because it's kind of like one day you say, you know what, this is how I feel and this is what I'm going to do. I think
Yeah,
the only thing is about like how you said the marketing. I know I don't know if you've had this happen, but you find an artist you've never heard of. You say, boy, I like this artist. And then you find their other songs and you're like, huh, this isn't like the other song. And then you
yeah,
find more songs and you say, huh, this isn't like the other song. So I could see that happening, but it just
yeah,
depends, I guess, once again, on what you're looking for. Because if the audience is just as fun as you are, they're just gonna have fun with it.
yeah. It's difficult because I had the same thing as you mentioned with the Arctic Monkeys, like AM. Like I love that album, and it's got that kind of like walking at nighttime with your hoodie up, kind of like after the
Yeah,
party vibe. And I was like, oh, I want more of this. I love this, but none of their other albums sound anything like it. And I was
yeah,
like, oh, I guess I don't like the Arctic Monkeys. I think I just like this album.
yeah, exactly. So
I
yeah,
think yeah,
good.
I definitely like pop rock and I guess like musicals.
Indeed, indeed.
Also, my dog is scratching. I'm just gonna quickly let my dog in. I'll be back in
Yeah,
a sec.
go for it.
Come in, silly. Here you go.
Oh.
Cute.
Now I notice we did talk about the styles here that I've picked up on. Now your songs,
Hmm.
and this may go hand in hand. Do the songs that you write, are they more personal experience, or is it just situations that you may think of, or just how you feel at that moment?
I think I've always written songs as a way to communicate.
Hmm.
So up to this point, they've always been personal experiences. I'm not opposed to the idea of just like thinking of a cool like story and then telling it, but
Uh-huh.
so far it's always been like I've lived through this thing or I feel this way, and like I'm finding a creative way to use that to make something cool, you know?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, as far as timing, is it hard to find that? I heard you say you work, and I do the music thing as well,
Mm,
and I do find a way, but a lot of
yeah.
times that just means staying up all night long. Is it
Yeah.
hard, is it hard to find the time to do the music?
Uh it's tough. Like yes and no. There are some things that it sounded like the MasterCard commercial. Um, there are some things that you do find like the time for quite easily, like playing gigs and stuff, because it's the evenings, it's in gigs and stuff. I find that I'm not as disciplined as I'd like to be. I know that some musicians can just sit down and, all right, now it's my writing time. I'm going to write from this to this.
Yeah.
Um, I I do struggle with that. I think also because I went back to uni to do music technology for the past 4 years. I've been at university,
Hmm.
which means that I've not been able to make as much money, which means I haven't been able to do as much cool music stuff as I'd like.
Hmm.
I think this process would have been like maybe 2 years if I was able to actually work enough to pay off the many, many massive things you got to pay for. That being
Yeah.
said, like you don't need money to do music, but yeah, it certainly helps.
The time is a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
wise man once said, if you have money, then you don't have time, and if you have time, then you don't have money.
So true.
Yeah.
uh,
And yeah, unfortunately, it goes hand in hand. Um, with um, with the whole COVID situation, which we briefly went over,
mm,
did that give you more time or less time? Or let me rephrase that: did it give you more inspiration or less inspiration? Because a lot of people, and I ask this to all artists, a lot of people they have all this time and they're like, okay, cool, I'm gonna make more music, and then some people just catch up on what they missed on Netflix.
yeah. I I was actually going to release this album last May, I think, or end of last year. Um, so I was already because COVID wasn't as bad over here, and because as long as you did like social distancing and wore masks and stuff, you were still able to kind of do some very essential things. During some of the lulls, I was still able to head up to Mulaney, where my producer is, and like do some vocals. And
Nice.
then he and I kind of back and forth online, where he'll be like, here's a tweak, and I'll be like, oh, how about this? Add reverb here, and blah blah blah. So we were still able to do the majority of it. And yeah, it was,
Digitally.
yeah, and it was meant to launch last year, but obviously, I've been working on this album for a big time. I wanted to kind of do it properly.
Hmm.
So we couldn't have the big launch. But the thing is, it was a blessing in disguise, because the estimated time was going to be like May last year, but it actually went till like November or December. And then the printing of the albums was also going to take like 6 to 8 weeks. So we wouldn't have actually been done in time. So COVID, if anything, actually bought me the time I actually needed
Yeah.
to do this properly,
Yeah.
Which is good. And also, this massive, awesome, cool music video that I'm getting done.
It's
That was
already
around
filmed.
August. Well, it's being animated.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I got in touch in August, because I was like, if we're going to take like 10 months to launch this properly, because we also were like, oh, start of the year, it's not really a good time. We also didn't know what's happening with COVID. End of the year is a bad time because people are traveling for Christmas and also university. So we think, again, it was going to be May 22nd. And then I was like, oh, I'm still at uni. How about June 18th when I'm out? And I was like, well, if I've got this long time, that's enough time to get like an animation done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this makes perfect sense. Now, with that,
Mm.
apparently you are what I was hoping you are, motivated.
Hell yeah.
So what keeps you motivated? And when I ask this question, we do not allow anyone to say, "Oh, my mother," or my heart and my soul. I want what keeps you motivated. You.
I think I've had a lot of friends be like, how can you spend this much money and like time on art, and like, you work 6 days a week, and for what?
Hmm.
But like, these are the same people who always get fast food, and like always get drugs, and always get alcohol and stuff. And it's like, like I'm never going to regret having made music, and I'm never going to regret having made a cool piece of art. Whereas, like, maybe I won't regret having a sweet burger, but also like it's going to be gone the next day,
Yeah, that's true.
And like, I think the
We see
longer
eye to
you
eye on
live,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
the longer you live, and the more just I think I like when you can tick a box. I have trouble with things of like, you need to keep doing this to make this successful and stuff. But like, when it can just be like, made an album, that will always be true. You always made an album.
Yeah.
And then if you live long enough, it's like, made an EP, made an EP, made an album, made a music video, made a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like a life you can look back on and be proud of. And also, like, I don't know, we're all gonna die. Why not do stuff that's fun, right?
Good grief, you took us to a place. No, now with the music that you make, and apparently you do have a team. I don't know if it's a big team, a small team, or just people that you somewhat associate with when it comes to music. Do you feel that you have honest people around you? So when you're making music, they say, "This is great, this sucks," or do they just say, "Everything's great all the time"?
I found that I kind of have a collection of all of them, and I think it's learning whose opinion to weight more.
Hmm.
And so, like, I'll have, like, I had a bit of a listening party when my songs were super, super in the demo stage,
Hmm.
like 3.5 years ago. And I was like, these are the songs because I've written like 20 songs, I've narrowed it down to these 10.
Hmm.
What do you think? What's your experience of this? And it would be like, oh, it's a guitar and vocal at the moment. Imagine this instrument, and, imagine this kind of vibe. And sometimes they'd be like, oh, that lyric makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't think that came off the way you thought. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Because, that you're, while you don't have like a producer, like they'd also be like, I think it could use bass here. And it's like, well, I did explain that, this isn't the final thing. So we're like, all right, so maybe not that side, but the fact, they're a person with ears and an opinion, and this is music for people. And if you play someone a song and they're like, this makes you sound like an asshole, I'm like, all right, that's not the intended goal. So we're going to take that feedback. But sometimes, it'll be like, I'll go to my producer or like other musicians, and I'll be like, I think it's like everyone's opinion is valid. It's just kind of taking their life experience on board and seeing whether
How much
they're
stock
looking
they
through
would
the right
put
line.
into it.
Yeah, like if I show my guitarist, I'm like, what do you think of this guitar tone? And he'll be like, that's really weak. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was good. And it's like, no, no, no. So if you do this, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
But yeah, everyone's got something to bring. It's just a
yeah.
matter of like figuring out what it is.
That makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like you somewhat answered my next question, but I still have to ask this:
Hmm.
how do you take criticism? Do you take it well, or do you go in the room and pout and do this to your arms?
See, I do both. When I take it initially, I'm just like, nope, 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 nope. You're wrong. And then I go away, and then I give myself a second, and I'm like, all right, because I have real trouble with change,
Yeah.
and like even if I listen to a bad song too many times, I get attached to that because it becomes familiar.
Hmm.
And they'll be like, what if we made it good? And I'm like, no, I liked it when it was bad. And then I have to think about it and be like,
Yeah.
no, I'm being a fool. This is objectively better. This is the new thing.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, okay, yes, you're right. So when I get feedback, I have to be like, hey, can I like, I'm at work. Can I give you like another day and then I'll reply? And it just
Yeah.
gives me time to kind of remove myself and my ego and be like, all right, what are they saying? What's the value here?
That's it's good that you come to that realization, because a lot of people don't pass the I'm upset phase,
Yeah.
and they don't get to the maybe they have a point and
Mm.
things of that nature. They just stick to I'm gonna punch holes in the wall.
Yeah. I've been
Now,
yeah.
do you have any studio pet peeves? When you're in the studio and you're working, I'm sure there's been other people you're working with
Mm.
that, I don't know, maybe they want to twerk instead of work on the music. Maybe they want to talk too much. Maybe they're too focused on getting drunk and not actually making music. What pisses
Yeah.
you off in the studio? You don't have to call
Uh,
any names.
yeah. Is that do you mean when I'm in the chair or when I'm in the booth? Because that's two different mindsets.
Oh yes, when you're, I want to hear both. I want to hear both because I'm sure they're interesting.
I think when I'm in the booth, it's very frustrating when like I'm the client and I'm the one making the music. It can be frustrating when the producer kind of steamrolls you. Because like, or if they're kind of just like another take, another take, another take. Because especially with a vocal performance, the human is the instrument.
Hmm.
And if they're starting to feel dejected, or if they're feeling tired, or if you're working them too hard, then their performance isn't going to be good. Like
Yeah,
the producer is playing the singer, you know?
yeah,
And if they have an idea, even if it's the stupidest idea, you'd be like, yeah, let's give it a try. And then let them listen to it. And then they'll be like, oh no, that's dumb. And you're like, that's all right. Let's do the other thing. Because if you say like, I want to make bird noises for half an hour.
yeah,
If you're like, that's objectively the worst thing you've ever said, you're an idiot. Let's
yeah,
do it again. Then the next take is gonna be like, dun, 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 and like you can hear,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's important
No,
to
no,
respect the performer.
no, that makes sense. And when
In
you're
the
in the
chair,
chair, yes.
pretty much everything that musicians do. Fucking rocking up late, refusing to pay, uh, bartering on the pay, saying that's good. Actually, wait, here's like a million notes, and then you change it. And they're like, actually, can we change it back? Because I didn't realize it's actually bad. Uh, having being like the therapist to the band, which I don't mind, but like when you're trying to get the take, when the band members are all shit talking each other as they all like come in and listen while the other ones are in the thing.
Yeah,
Uh, not changing your bass strings, not tuning your drums, not learning the part, figuring out the part in the studio, rocking up late. I already said that. Got so many things to be frustrated at.
yes.
Um, but
These
also
all
when
sound
you
familiar.
yeah, but when you hit that groove and it's working, then you're like, oh, this is why I do it. But fuck, musicians are very frustrating.
Oh yes, indeed. And you know, they're always very particular, and they all have a certain process. And that's why you always hear this famous phrase when groups break up: creative differences.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's exactly what they mean. Now, with that being said, what are your thoughts on featuring with other artists? Both ways, whether you're featuring on their music or they're featuring on yours, do you enjoy it, or is it kind of like, I'd rather just work on my own music?
I like the idea. I've done two features. The second one hasn't been released yet.
Hmm.
The first one was good, although I it's kind of a tricky one because I didn't know too much about how featuring worked in the music industry because I just heard songs where people featured. I didn't know whether it was a I wrote a part, sing on it, or whether it was like let's collaborate on this. My experience of featuring on someone else's song was I wrote a part, sing it,
Hmm.
um, and I felt more like a featured backing vocalist than a featured vocalist.
Huh.
I didn't hate it, and like it was great fun, and it's always really nice to be asked as well because it makes you feel like somebody. Um, I have had someone feature on my song. That's oh you heard it. That's the jazz duet.
Oh yes.
Um, yeah, and I felt that was a lot more sharing of the limelight. It didn't feel like a featured backing vocalist. That being said, I also had a second collaborative
Ah.
piece. My friend Shamini came in to sing on Run Into the Night. It wasn't as equal as I would have liked. I felt like I think Nick mixed her as more of a backing vocalist than a duet,
Uh-huh.
which is a bit of a shame. But I
So
think it was a good time.
something tells me you had a tear in your eye about this.
Yeah, I thought she did a really good performance. She has a very good and cool and unique voice, which filled out a certain point in the frequency really well.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah.
This may be a more technical question, and some of our listeners, if you mess with music, you will appreciate this question. If you don't, forgive me, but this is the nerd in me that I have to ask. What makes you go down the Logic road versus FL Studio or any other? I use FL Studio. I haven't experienced Logic. I've seen it and I've kind of, but I'm so comfortable over here. But I
Mm.
do know that Logic is industry standard. What
Well, well, it's totally a matter of what kind of music you make because
Mhm.
each door you can make great music in every single door. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't.
Oh yes, this
Um,
is a fact.
yeah, it just depends what you're using it for. So like Ableton Live is really good for live DJing and like loops and stuff and samples and beats and things. I've and also FL Studio is also really great for like beats and stuff, but also you can use it for other stuff. Um, Pro Tools is fucking very inaccessible and some bullshit, but also it's really good at emulating tape sound. And people who were recording on tape will be like, "Oh, I see this is replicating this," and it's really good for that workflow. Um, and
You
that's
know,
also another.
now you know they have VSTs for that sound also though.
Yes, they do. It's almost like Pro Tools is expensive and bullshit,
Yeah.
and unnecessary now. But Logic I like because it's very composition focused. It's really good with MIDI. Pro Tools has a terrible MIDI system,
Mhm.
but also I'm sure someone out there can make MIDIs work really well in Pro Tools. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But Logic is really good for MIDI. Um, it's just really well designed to build a song in. Pro Tools is good to record a song that you've already made. I've just found that, and also I started in GarageBand, and Logic is just like taking the training wheels off GarageBand.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
It sounds like it may be the same for you that it is for me. It's more of a comfort thing because
yeah.
the fact that I use FL Studio, I'm sure if I went into Logic or Pro Tools, I know things will be in different places, but it would most likely be very similar, and I'm sure I could get my idea of my mind around it. But I think the comfort
Mm.
is what makes me say, hmm. Do I want to learn to get better at what I'm already doing? Or do I want to go into a whole other DAW and start at square one? I'm like, well, you know what? I'm good. I'm just going to keep fine tuning this skill before. But yeah, in the end, I may step into other DAWs, but it's not so important to me right now.
Yeah. The other thing that called out to me about Logic was the MIDI sounds, uh, which is very funny now that I've actually learned a bit more. But GarageBand MIDIs are very recognizably MIDI, and they're not very good.
Yeah.
And Logic MIDIs are better than GarageBand MIDIs, but they're still definitely MIDIs. But
Yeah.
in my young teenage brain, I was like, these MIDIs sound real. They're so good. They're like
Yeah.
the best. And that was why I like that you can just fork out like a couple hundred and then you just own Logic.
Mm-hmm.
I hate this subscription fee
Oh, yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
Like like I now have an industry standard software because years ago I like saved up my pennies for like a couple months and then just now I have it.
Well,
Like
that's good.
that's yeah. Whereas Pro Tools.
Speaking of the the MIDI sound,
Hmm.
see, I know one thing that FL Studio has, and I'm assuming Logic probably has it as well. But they have where instead of you just inputting notes, you can give it a strum feature. So just say if it's a guitar, you can
Hmm.
kind of make each note kind of lag behind, so it goes ring versus
Yeah, yeah.
just note, 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 and you're like, yeah, yeah, right. The guitar doesn't sound like that. You just
Yeah.
punch these little notes in. So it's a helpful thing. Now, back to the album. The album
Yeah.
is on the way. What release date, if you have one, are you looking at, or approximately do you think you may be dropping?
So June 18th on all streaming platforms.
Yes. And what is the name of this album? This is the moment when I need, I always give my guests this, the moment to talk your shit. This is where you talk any websites, any place they need to follow you, any merch, any upcoming shows, or if you just want to give shout outs to the friends and homies. Anything you need to say that we didn't cover, the microphone belongs to you.
I like it. Well, yeah, June 18th. It's gonna be dropping on all streaming services. That's Slow Burn. I'm your man, Alex Smith. I'm kind of focusing on Spotify at the moment, so all my stuff up there at the moment. If you want to give that a listen and a follow, that's really appreciated. I also have a Patreon, but don't worry too much about that. You just met me. And also keep an eye out for the animated music video from the creators of the Tales of Elethrion series. That's going to be awesome, probably around July. And also, yeah, shout out to the friends and homies.
There you go. With that being said, we had a great warrior here, the great Alex Smith, or should we say, yo man, Alex Smith. We got technical, we got lovely, we got some good information, and you have some homework to do. All you people listening, you know what to go and listen to. You go ahead and take your shoes off, let your stinky socks smell up your apartment, cross your legs, and then sit back and eat yourself a bologna sandwich while enjoying your man, Alex Smith. Is there anything that we did not cover, my guy?
No, no, you did great.
This is a man of class. I'm gonna go and enjoy these tunes. I'm hoping that you guys are gonna follow my lead and do the same thing. You know what to do. Keep following Velvet Vibes podcast. And if you're sitting on the toilet, make sure you wipe your fanny. Enjoy your afternoon. Live the dream.